U.S. President Donald Trump has said a crew member caught behind enemy lines after Iran shot down the F-15 fighter jet is now safe and sound after being rescued by the U.S. military. Now, the airman was the second member of a two-person crew of an the F-15 jet that was brought down by Iranian air defenses. Now, the first member of the crew had been recovered. Now, Trump, in a social media post on Truth Social, said that the crew member, who also happens to be a colonel, is injured, but added that he will be just fine. In the same post, he hailed the U.S. military for pulling off what he described as the most daring search and rescue operations in U.S. history. In a message to the Americans, he said, and I'm quoting, "We will never leave an American warfighter behind." He said the operations prove that U.S. has achieved overwhelming air dominance and superiority over the Iranian skies. Now, furthermore, a new Fox News reports has emerged. Now, it suggests prior to locating the weapons system officer and the U.S. military's daring rescue, the CIA had first launched a deception campaign spreading word inside Iran that U.S. forces had already found him and were moving him on the ground for exfiltration out of the country. While the Iranians were confused and uncertain of what was happening, the agency used its unique, exquisite capabilities to search for and find the American airman. The WSO's exact location was shared with the Pentagon and the White House. The president ordered an immediate rescue mission, which CENTCOM executed, with CIA continuing to provide real-time information. All right, to discuss more on this, we are now being joined by Brazin Wakmer. He is a research fellow at the Center for Iranian Studies, SOAS, University of London. Thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. Of course, I'd like to begin with, this big news that has come in that U.S. has finally rescued its this officer, the airman from Iran. Your reaction to this first?
I think it's excellent news on Easter Sunday morning, as you can imagine, speaking from London, and it would have been confirmed, which is why President Trump would not have just disseminated it. The location in southwest Iran in Kohgiluye Boyar Ahmed province is pretty inhospitable, isolated terrain, a rural area at best, and U.S. Special Forces would have entered. Details, of course, are hazy at this time and will only make its way out eventually and maybe at the end of the war, whenever it happens. But for now, I'm delighted to state that the individual has been rescued, which would have been another problem altogether, given how Iran are past masters at hostage taking and, all the rest that necessarily follows with such incidents.
And talking, of course, end of the war, U.S. President Donald Trump has said that Iran had 48 hours to make a deal on the opening the vital Strait of Hormuz. And now Iran has also warned of hell across the region. It's not just U.S. facilities anymore, but the entire region if U.S. and Israel escalate this whole conflict. Now, with such comments coming from Iran and Trump saying negotiations are still on, do you see any chance of off-ramp here?
No, I don't, as we are on air. You see, it would appear now, and things do change so fast, Jyotsna, as you can very well imagine. The Iranians have stonewalled the entire Islamabad proposal that Pakistan put forward. So now they don't wish to pursue anything at all, even the very 5 points that they furnished to DC. And one of the 5 points, as you do know, was exclusive sovereignty over the Strait of Hormuz, and which is actually something that strains credulity, given that maritime jurisdiction during peacetime, normalcy, was shared of the strait between Oman and Iran. So the question of Iran having exclusive sovereignty over it, never was a question. Then, as I've iterated before, Iran is a signatory but has never ratified the UN Convention of the International Law of the Sea 1982. So it cherry picks its way, but that's not something that's going to sit well with even those who are necessarily its partners across Asia, who are suffering with the Strait of Hormuz blockade. Now, what has also happened, and which has come in for immense indignation on the part of the Saudis, is the claim by Mohammed Ghalibaf, the Iranian speaker, that we are willing to accede to requests on a bilateral basis from every country in the region for letting their vessels pass. That's pretty much gatekeeping and blackmailing the world at large, including those who are necessarily your trading partners and not outright your enemies, say like the US or Israel. And to which the Saudis have pointedly remarked in the last few hours that what are we to make of such assurances from Tehran, given that Riyadh inked with Tehran a 2001 comprehensive security agreement. In January 2016, Jyotsna, the Saudi embassy was ransacked in Tehran by mobs. This in a country where ordinary civilians get shot for dissent and protests, but they had full liberty to ransack the Saudi Chancellery building. Relations broke down and were suspended, as you do know. And then in 2023, Beijing went ahead and brokered a patching up. And what of it now, given that the Saudis on the eve of the war stated that we will not allow our soil to be used for attacks, which is not exactly exempted then from any of these attacks. So that is just one salient example I'd use. And the Saudis are the most important among the GCC allies in terms of size, resources, and the rest, as you can imagine. And if that's what the Saudis endure and face, can you imagine what smaller states like the UAE, Bahrain, or Kuwait must feel?
And these are, as you said, of course, that Iran has also called them brotherly nations. Let's also talk about
exactly.
Right.
And Jyotsna, sorry, if I might,
you may.
Pardon me for interrupting. In 2011, the Iranian deep state, contracted the Mexican drug cartel to kill Ambassador Adil al-Jubeir, the Saudi ambassador to DC at that time too. I thought I'd just point that out as well.
Absolutely. Now, of course, we were talking about Iran and its brotherly nations, but also then U.S. allies. We have the French-owned ship that has passed through the Strait of Hormuz. It is the first ship owned by a major Western European firm to go through the strait since the conflict began. And if we talk about the other countries or allies, non-European Japanese ship carrying natural gas have also made it out of the Strait of Hormuz. So do you think that the threat remains relevant when Trump is saying about this 48 hours, or do you think Iran is still resilient and would be okay with other ships going? As they have mentioned, the Strait of Hormuz is open for all the other ships and not enemy ships, that is, of course, U.S. related or Israel.
The French vessel in question passed, to which I would like to alert one and all that Paris has tabled a resolution for opening up the blockade, a diluted draft in lieu of what Bahrain has proposed or had proposed, currently as it chairs the Security Council. And the French text does not even mention the word Iran as a belligerent party. It doesn't even mention the Islamic Republic of Iran. So much for diluting down and, quite frankly, appeasement. So maybe that has something to do with that vessel passing, and the French are pretty honed in their transactional skills. So let's leave it at that. Then you have the question of what happens next. Well, the question is, how long does Iran think it can continue this war of attrition? You see, intelligence estimates, and not just from the Pentagon and CENTCOM, but also independently assessed by, say, the Institute of Strategic Studies, London and elsewhere, have now given us to understand that a third of Iran's naval arsenal has definitely been destroyed. The Pentagon puts it at 155 vessels, which is not to say the other third we may not know of. And I concede that it could have been spirited away, or it could be damaged and we don't know with certitude. But the question is, Iran will continue this because according to its logic, if it survives, the regime survives, just the very act of survival with its back against the wall is enough for it to consider itself triumphant. But beyond that, it has nothing else to offer or, put up. 12,300 targets as of April 1st have been damaged and destroyed, both. Command and control centers, munitions depots, missile sites, weapons production and storage sites, the works.
All right, but this also comes as there is a CNN report that had just came out saying that roughly half of Iran's missile launcher is still intact, and thousands of one-way attack drones remain in Iran's arsenal despite daily pounding by U.S. and Israel. And these, of course, include these. They might be buried underground by strikes, but they are not destroyed.
Precisely, and that's what we need to know with greater certitude, as I just mentioned, is that this other third, as to what of it, is it buried and is waiting to see action eventually, or has it been moved elsewhere? And in the months that led up to this, Jyotsna, I do remember certain IRGC media mentions around, say, January and December, that they had moved some of their arsenal towards Sistan, Balochistan province and elsewhere in southeast Iran, as if heading towards the Pakistan border, away from where most of the launches necessarily go out to Israel, say in western Iran, that way, the Kurdish regions and at large, Hamadan province and elsewhere. So that is something to be seen and to be noted with the passage of time.
And also talking about Iranian attacks, Kuwait had just recently come out saying that 2 power and water desalination plants have been attacked by Iranian drones, resulting in significant material damage. Now, desalination plants, of course, we all know, is a lifeline of the Gulf states. Since Iran has warned of regional escalation, is there any kind of retaliation we can see from these Gulf states if there is desalination plants are targeted? Do you see any retaliation coming from there?
Not from the GCC states per se, because so far, despite immense pressure, they have held their nerve and have consistently maintained in public pronouncements. The Bahrain's Interior Ministry, for example, which very starkly said a few days ago, we emphatically refuse to be drawn into a war which we have not started. Now, that's just not taking a high moral ground. That's taking a very realist perspective and a pragmatic one. It is exercising restraint. Not that this restraint has bought them any favors from Tehran, but Bahrain and all the others have taken a collective posture that we are not raising the temperature. So ultimately, it will be incumbent upon Washington to see any further kinetic action, if it does take place in the region along the straits, or in any one of the 7 islands or islets that the US may target for a land assault, which are still off the coast of Iran's southern littoral.
Also, there has been attacks from, let's say, Houthis in Yemen. There is, of course, now we see a 5th attack that Israel has reported. Do you think there is a potential of escalation from that side as well? Israel is already, they're waging war and attacks in Lebanon. There's also then attacks from Yemen. And of course, they're, countering the attacks coming in from Iran. How long can Israel go for?
Well, that's another important question as to how long can Israel be in open all-war season and how long can the state survive, taking that with constraints and resource budgets and the rest of it. The Houthi question is important in that it has not been entirely decapitated. So at some point that would have to be, questioned and looked into. You will also remember, that reminds me, Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, on the eve of the war, when talks were still going on, had mentioned, and I think he spoke for the Muslim neighborhood at large, not just the GCC states, that at some point we need to sit down with Tehran and thrash it out once and for all, a frank forthright discussion of its funding regional proxies, because all of them are a clear and present danger to us. Obviously, the war has upended that aspect, but the fact is, it is not just one of Mr. Trump's 15 demands that Iran cease and desist regional funding of proxies. It is something which has been upmost in the mind of all in the Arabian Peninsula and Turkey. Not just Israel, obviously.
Now, President Donald Trump has said that Iran couldn't do a thing about American aircraft operating over its territory, insisting its air defenses had been significantly weakened. Of course, you've also slightly mentioned that his defense minister, Secretary Pete Hegseth, also said that the U.S. had achieved air superiority over Iran. How do you assess these comments coming in when Iran is still, even now, attacking there's been attacks in regions? In Abu Dhabi, there has been a fire in a petrochemical plant. So these are attacks that are coming in from Iran. How do you see these comments coming in from Trump and Pete Hegseth about superiority?
The superiority bit is correct, technically speaking. I mean, it has been a stunning military success, but when all is said and done. And when one tends to dilate on American losses, which many in the media do pick up, you have to realize that the US is transparent in furnishing data. We don't get information out of Iran, so we don't necessarily know what's happening there. So democracies are at a disadvantage on that aspect in any case. Yes, much is made of the two KC-35 tankers destroyed, or one AWACS at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, or the one A-10 Warthog aircraft brought down by an Iranian surface-to-air missile. But these are just random ones that you can count on one hand in the scheme of things after a month of a war. So, by every parameter or yardstick, America isn't bleeding arsenal or forces, if you think about it. So, on what basis do we reach the conclusion or insinuate the conclusion that the Americans are taking rapid and heavy hits? Far from it.
Right. Of course, there are 48 hours as Trump has given the ultimatum for Iran. We'll have to wait and see if what kind of escalation or de-escalation we see, if possible. Thank you so much for joining on the broadcast, Mr. Brazin, and giving your opinions on this. That was Brazin Wagmer, Iranian Studies Fellow at the University of London, SOAS. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.